Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. It is officially week 0. College football is here. Starting on Saturday the 24th. Got a good game to start. Nice ACC game. We got Florida State, Georgia Tech. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, Florida State, Georgia Tech. This game's overseas in Dublin, Ireland. Georgia Tech currently sitting as 11.5-point dogs. There are 11s out there if you look. Total sitting at 55.5. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on the Noles here. Very slight lean. In fact, pretty much right on par with where the sportsbooks have it. According to the model, we're looking at 32.7, 21.1 Florida State. Not a ton of head-to-head history here. These two teams have only met 4 times in the last 10 years. Georgia Tech's actually 3-1 against the spread in their last 4 matchups against Florida State. But they haven't seen them since 2022, and Florida State beat the hell out of them in 2022. Georgia Tech took the 2 before that, but we're talking about 2020, 2015. So definitely a little ways back. So let's go ahead and get into this one, and we'll start with the Florida State offense. Numbers aren't crazy looking from last year. Now, obviously, these are definitely going to be skewed by the end of the season when Jordan Travis got hurt. Roadmaker took over as quarterback, and obviously, we all know, it was talked about ad nauseum. Florida State offense wasn't the same after Jordan Travis. So those last few games at the end of the season definitely skewing these numbers a bit. Although I will say, Florida State offense not quite as explosive as you thought they were last year. I mean, yeah, if you look at the schedule and the game logs, they're putting up big numbers. 31 points, 37 points, 40 points. They were scoring some points, and their offense was definitely good. But there's a few games in there maybe a little bit misleading. I mean, Boston College, they won 31-29. They only had like 350 yards of offense in that game. They also scored 31 points in the Clemson game and got that win, but 7 of those points were in overtime. They only had 311 yards of offense in the game. And in fact, if Clemson makes that short field goal at the end of the fourth quarter there, they lose. So, look, I'm not saying Florida State's offense was bad by any means. Just maybe the point totals in some of those games a little bit misleading. But we're not talking about last year's Florida State offense. We're talking about this year's Florida State offense. Returning production isn't looking great. 90th in the country in returning production. 10 returning starters, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. A couple big ones gone on the offensive side. Jordan Travis, quarterback, obviously on the Jets now. Running back Trey Benson, he's on the Cardinals. So both those guys are in the NFL now. Taking over at quarterback for Florida State is DJU, as I'm sure you know. Coming off a good season with Oregon State. Honestly, back-to-back good seasons. I feel like DJU may have got branded a little bit unfairly based on that first year as a starter at Clemson. I mean, he's put into a really tough spot. It was Deshaun Watson, then Trevor Lawrence, and then DJU. In his freshman year, he came in one game and threw 5 touchdowns. So when he took over the starting job in his sophomore year, everyone was like, oh, here it is. Here's the next #1 pick in the NFL. Just had really big shoes to fill, and obviously his sophomore year with Clemson wasn't great. I mean, it wasn't good at all. And he kind of got unfairly branded as a bad quarterback. But since then, he had a good season his junior year at Clemson, and then he played great with Oregon State last year. Well, he played really well. Let's not say great, but he played really well last year at Oregon State. Obviously, he was throwing against Pac-12 defenses, but still, let's give him some credit. Here's the graphic right here. In his first year with Clemson, 55.6% completions, 9 touchdowns, 9 picks, just 6 yards per completion. Look at those numbers in comparison to his last 2 years, his last year with Clemson and then last year with Oregon State. No question, night and day difference. He's definitely taken a big step forward. And regardless of what you personally think of DJU, they like him a lot. He's definitely a highly touted recruit here, and they think he's going to be great. So they got the quarterback they wanted. Now, one thing that might concern me a little bit when it comes to DJU, and maybe I'm being a little bit overcritical here, but last year with Oregon State, despite having a good season, and he was solid last year, he really didn't show up in the big games. You can see in the graphic here, these are the last 2 games of the season, arguably the 2 biggest games of the year back to back. Oregon's passing offense just wasn't there. 194.5 yards. I mean, 5.72 yards per pass attempt. EPA, success rate. I mean, none of that looks good. Passing game wasn't there when it mattered in those 2 games. And that was kind of a pattern throughout the whole season. I mean, he struggled in the Utah game. He really struggled on the road at Washington State. He was also terrible against San Diego State. Not that it really fits the mold of a big game, but really didn't play well in that game either. So definitely not something I'm thrilled about. Although I will say the year before that with Clemson, he showed up in some big games for them. So like I said, I might be a little bit overcritical here, but I thought it was interesting enough to point out. But I think everyone would agree that the bigger concern here for Florida State's offense is the weapons. They're all gone. Keon Coleman, NFL. Johnny Wilson, NFL. Jaheim Bell, the tight end, NFL. Those three guys combined for 130 catches, 1,700, well, almost 1,800 yards receiving and 15 touchdowns. By far, the three leading receivers on the team, all gone to the NFL. Now, it's Florida State. They've got talent. They'll be fine. But remember, we're not handicapping the Florida State season right now. We're handicapping the Florida State-Georgia Tech game in particular, and it's week 0 in Dublin. So, yeah, new quarterback, bunch of new receivers, playing an offense they've never played in before. Definitely don't like that at all. And on top of that, they got a new guy in the backfield as well. Like I mentioned earlier, Trey Benson gone to the NFL. He's on the Cardinals. They're bringing Roydell Williams from Alabama. Now, I mean, this dude's really good. I mean, he could be one of the better running backs in the country here. So by no means am I saying, they lost all the talent at running back. I'm sure this dude's going to be a savage this year. But again, we're not handicapping the season. We're handicapping week 0 in Dublin. And again, just throw it on there. Running back, quarterback, receiving corps, coaching staff, all that have never played a football game together. Now for the good news if you're a Florida State fan. The Georgia Tech defensive numbers from last season, good Lord. This defense wasn't good. Well, this run defense was really bad. Pass defense was bad too, but not quite as bad. The run defense, holy hell, 127th in yards per carry allowed, 123rd in run defense success rate. So right off the bat, you know Georgia Tech needs to improve that run defense. And look, they made some moves to do so. Whether or not it's successful, whether or not it's going to be successful in week 0, that's a much different question. But they did bring in Tyler Santucci to coach the defense. That's the DC from Duke last year with Mike Elko. Duke had a savage run defense last year. Look at these defensive numbers from Duke last season with Tyler Santucci at DC. Now, to be fair, it's Mike Elko's defense and he was the DC, so who knows how much credit Tyler Santucci deserves for this, but he was the defensive coordinator on this defense, and this is with Duke's talent. By the way, Duke isn't top 15 recruiting program at all, so to put up these kind of numbers in the ACC with Duke's type of talent, this is impressive, man. 20th in points per game allowed, 34th in opponent yards per play allowed. This is a really good defense. Specifically, they were great against the run. Now, we do have to mention, though, that Norvell and this Florida State offense saw this exact Duke defense with DC, Tyler Santucci, coaching it last season and didn't really have a ton of problems moving the football on them. 4.8 yards per carry. I mean, it's not completely terrible. It's not good. It's not like they ran all over them. 4.8 yards per carry with the Georgia Tech defense, they would take that, trust me. 420 yards of total offense. Final score 38-20, FSU won. Even that final score is a little deceiving because Florida State, in their first 2 drives of the game, drove down the field and then turned it over on downs. So Duke was actually up 10-0, still lost by 18. That's not a great look for Tyler Santucci and the Georgia Tech defense, although I will say this was last year's Florida State offense with Jordan Travis and their full offensive line and Trey Benson and the receivers, Johnny Wilson, the tight end, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell. I mean, they had everybody. That was a loaded offense. This year's Florida State offense looks nothing like that. Also, this game was at home in Tallahassee. So there was definitely some favorable circumstances there for Norvell and the Florida State offense. I don't think this is a terrible look. The reason I brought that up is, in my opinion, that's the question we need answered here. If we can answer that question, we can place a winning bet on this game. Can Georgia Tech's defensive front keep Florida State's run game somewhat in check? And I'm not talking about 3.8 yards per carry. Can they hold them to 4.5 yards per carry? Can they keep Florida State from absolutely gashing them on the ground? Because with DJU, new receivers, new running back, all that, on the road, overseas in Dublin, if they're not ripping north of 5 yards per carry, I don't think they have any business laying 11.5 points, honestly. So can Georgia Tech's defensive front keep the Florida State run game somewhat in check? Now, when we pull up the metrics from Georgia Tech's defensive front from last season, I mean, it's not a great look here. I mean, 129th in defensive line yards, 126th in power success rate. Specifically, they got gassed when they played good teams, too. This is against the 6 teams with the best offenses on their schedule. It was their 4 ranked opponents, and I threw Clemson and Louisville in there. So against those teams, 5.97 yards per carry, 51.2% run defense success rate is terrible. 3.85 defensive. I mean, this is so bad. So Georgia Tech, whenever they saw a decent offense, got gashed last year. Definitely not a great look. But I will say there is a glimmer of hope when it comes to the Georgia Tech defensive front. So this is their projected depth chart here. Now, those two names highlighted in gold, those are their transfers. Thomas Gore came in from Miami. Romello Height came in from USC. So they got two starters on the defensive line coming from big programs. Zeke Biggers was there last year. So they return a starter. They bring in two transfers that they think they're going to hit on. And then that guy, Sylvain Yanjuin, right there, you can see number 32. He was supposed to be a starter last year. He missed the entire season with an injury. So he'll probably end up starting on the end as well. This defensive line, personnel-wise, isn't nearly as bad as it was last year. In fact, the guy that was projected to be the starter last year, as of right now, he's listed as a backup. So that just shows you the state of the Georgia Tech defensive line, certainly in a much better position right now than it was last year. So can the Georgia Tech defensive front keep Florida State's run game from absolutely slaughtering them? Yeah, there's a lot of things going their way here. I mean, it's overseas. They got two new transfers in, big-time transfers. A defensive coordinator in there specializes in stopping the run against a Florida State offense playing their first game with nothing but new pieces. Yeah, I don't think it's crazy. Now, on the other side of the field, this is where it's all positive for Georgia Tech. I mean, this offense looks really good. First of all, they were good last year. Top 25 rushing attack in the country last year. 13th in yards per carry, 17th in rushing success rate, 18th in effective rush. They got the quarterback they want. He's back. Haynes King, 61.6% completions, over 2,800 yards, 27 touchdowns through the air last year. Turnover's a bit of a problem, something he definitely needs to work on, but no question, this kid is talented. He can run, he can sling it. They got their guy in the backfield back, Jamal Haynes, star running back. What I really like about Jamal Haynes is he seemed to heat up as the season went on. You can see his splits right here. Last 6 games of the year, averaging 99 rushing yards per game, 6.6 yards per carry. And by the way, it's not like Georgia Tech's schedule got easy in the second half of the season at all. I mean, they went to Clemson. They played Georgia, the best team in the country, played North Carolina in there. So it wasn't that the schedule got easier. Jamal Haynes just seemed to figure it out. He was one of the better backs in the country second half of the year. So they got their quarterback back. They got their star running back back. Now, as far as their receivers, I don't really know much about their receiving core. They lost their tight ends. They had 2 tight ends they lost them both. But the offensive line, 4 of 5 starters back, and the 5th starter is a transfer from Middle Tennessee who started last year. So they bring 4 of 5 starters back and then bring in a starter with FBS starting experience to play the 5th spot. So the offensive line should only get better. As far as the Georgia Tech offense, nothing but thumbs up here. I mean, it was a great offense last year, should be even better this year. But let's be real, we can't sit here and pretend that they don't have their hands full here against Florida State. I mean, one of the best defenses in the country last year, probably the best pass defense in the country. See their defensive numbers, I mean, pretty elite looking across the board. Also, this game being in Dublin, Florida State was one of the best road defenses in the FBS last year. Their numbers away from home, great. Certainly not what you like to see if you're Georgia Tech. Also, it gets even deeper. Georgia Tech passing much better against zone coverage than man coverage. See, they're passing against man coverage pretty ugly looking. The reason I bring that up, what does Florida State like to do? Run a shitload of man coverage. They were 18th in the country in man coverage frequency last year. Top 10 numbers across the board when playing man coverage. So I definitely don't like any of that. Here are their defensive line numbers. I mean, not absolutely elite, but certainly towards the top of the country. No question, Florida State's defensive numbers, great across the board. But again, just like their offense, it's not that I don't think they have talent. It's just so many new faces. I mean, a majority of the good defensive pieces on that Florida State team last year are gone. Now, from what I'm reading, they are deep as hell, and they should certainly be a top 10, top 15 defense again. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know all these new pieces taking over for Florida State. I'm just reading opinions from people I trust telling me that they should be good. But again, we're not talking about Florida State on the season. We're talking about week 0 in Dublin, and all I'm hearing is a bunch of new faces. So now these guys saw the field last year, by the way. Florida State had a big-time defensive rotation, so it's not like completely new guys that have never started a game before. They should be fine. I'm a lot more worried about the Florida State offense than I am the defense. I'm sure they're loaded with talent, and they'll be great again. But week 0 against an offense in Georgia Tech that I think is going to be really good, I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia Tech's able to move the chains here and there and put some points up in this, which is why, as far as betting this game, I took them. I took the 11.5 points, and I already bet this. I took Georgia Tech plus 11.5, laid it down. Second bet I made of the year. Just placed it. Felt good. Felt good to be placing a college football bet. So I already locked that in. If you want to see all the bets I currently have open, I changed it from last year. So last year I used to do blog posts with my bets. This year, it's just an open bet ticket. So if you go on the website and you click open bets or open football bets or something, you'll see all the bets I have open at that time, which I feel is much more efficient. And from what I've asked around, and people were like, yeah, that's a much better way to do it. So if you're interested in that, head over to KyleKirms.com. If you sign up for Sauce Network Plus, you can participate in the betting league, join the Discord, all of that. So head over to that if you're interested. Live shows, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time during the weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the weekends. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a great football season. Good to be back. Almost fall. Missed you guys. Let's go.